This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome everyone to Phase 2 of Campus IV's full service client training. In today's training, what we're going to review is the packaging process. So the packaging process is going to contain a high-level overview of the report center and most importantly, the ISER reports, so how to retrieve your daily imported ISERs. Also, we're going to review the funding estimate. The funding estimate we are going to review in a clock hour non-term institution as well as a term-based institution. And essentially, I'll be showing you how you can create those funding estimates. And then lastly, we're going to review the student portal. And the student portal will be in the student's perspective, so you'll be able to see how the students see the student portal from their mobile device and essentially go through that so that way you're able to troubleshoot any of their concerns once that student portal is turned live. Okay, and to begin, we're going to, as you can see, you are on the dashboard. So once you log into your environment, over to the right, you're going to see the links section. And below the links section is going to be the report center. And once you click on the report center, it is going to populate some predetermined reports for you. And starting here on the left, packaging related, the first one is a student enrollment detail report. So this report essentially is going to provide to you a student population within the core system of all your students and all their enrollment statuses. The projected enrollment detail report can be used as a start date report or a packaging start date report. Essentially, it's going to show you any of your prospective or future start students that will begin classes soon. Below that is the disbursement related reports, and starting with the first one is a student funding detail report. This report is going to break down all the funding for any particular student, and that's going to be any projections, any paid disbursements, and any disbursements that have been refunded. Past due projections report essentially is going to capture any students that have any past due funding. Projected funding report and projected funding aging report is going to cover students, is essentially going to be able to provide you a cash flow for any given time. So that would be the projected funding report. The aging report will be able to break out that cash flow in a 30-day in 30-day increments for you. Paid disbursement report is highly used during audit time. Essentially, this is going to capture all the students that have received disbursements within the core environment. And then your pay list analysis report, if you remember from phase 1 training, essentially this is going to be able to capture students that fall into a not ready status based on the system's disbursement criteria. Now over to the right, you're going to see some ISER related reports. So the first one is the ISER report real time, and then the ISER report uncleared, and the ISER correction pending. Essentially, at the institution level, the only one you will be concerned with is the ISER import real time. The ISER report uncleared and pending is essentially for use for campus IV personnel. Essentially, the uncleared report is going to be able to allow us to clear out any subsequent ISERs that may come in, for example, NSLDS post-screening ISERs and things of that nature. And then your ISER correction pending essentially is a way for us to be able to track and make sure that ISER corrections are successfully being sent over to CPS. Now I'm going to jump into the ISER report real time. Now any given report will ask for a certain criteria to run that particular report. So in this case, this report is giving you the ability to use a social security number or a student's last name, but also you're able to filter by award year, whether the student is selected or not selected, if the student is unmatched or not. So unmatched would be students that have added the school code to their FAFSA, but that particular student has not yet been uploaded into the core environment or your institution's environment. You could also filter by V group and then of course by location. Okay, so on a daily basis, if you are running this report, so for example, if I wanted to run this report and see what ICERs were imported today, I would essentially just use today's date. But for example purposes, I'm going to go ahead and push this back. That way it can populate some ICERs for you so you can kind of see how it will look on a daily basis. So once I've entered in my criteria, I go ahead and hit execute criteria. And what you would see are all the ICERs essentially that imported for today. Now, ICERs that have under the student column, there's a link. These essentially came in today and were successfully linked to that student's profile page. And you can always click on the name and it will bring you to that student's profile page. Now, just below that, you'll see that there's the student name column has unknown, and then over to the right, it shows 0 potential student matches. Essentially, what this means is that these are the students that have added school codes to the FAFSA, but they have not yet been uploaded into your environment. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do with the actual report here. As you notice, all of our reports have this report format for you. You can always, for these unmatched ICERs down here below, if you do have the social security number and the first 2 letters of the last name, but if you wanted to search by the student's full first name and last name, you would simply just click on the 3 little dots right here, highlight columns, and then you would click on last name and first name. And as you can see here, it did populate the first and last name for you. Now, our system is on a web base, so you are able to use the web base find feature by selecting Control F and then simply just type in the student's name to make it a little bit easier for you to search for those ICERs. What you can also do with the report is that you can drop in the CPS transaction date. So, of course, this is the date that CPS processed these particular ICERs. So again, not the import date, but the actual CPS transaction date will be available as well. And then there are other items here that you can add to the report itself. Now, one cool thing about the report is that you are able to, of course, again, sort and filter. So if I wanted to sort by dependency status, let's just say, and maybe campus name, you just click and drag whether it's selected. You click and drag and drop it in here. And as you see, it will sort and filter for you. Now, you are able to save these sortings and filtering, any manipulation that you do to the actual report by just simply clicking Save Configuration here. What will pop up is a section for you to type in a description. So if I just put daily ICER report, and then the next option is to whether to make this report public or not public. So making it public will allow all users to use it. If you leave this box unchecked, then it will be only specific to you. So we're just going to make this public and then hit save. So now I'm going to go ahead and go back and run this report again. So I run my daily report and I come in and I select load configuration, and then down here below is the report that I created. It will show that it was created by me and the date that it was last used. And then I simply select load configuration. And if you can see in the back, you'll see that that filtering and that sorting that we established previously is now applied to the report. Now you're able to view your ICERs directly from here as well by selecting View. And And once this ISER populates, you'll see that the formatting is a very, very basic formatting for the ISER. And then you can always right click and print. And again, that print feature will allow for a clean format for that ISER as well. Now, admissions departments can be given access to the core environment, of course, with limited access, view access only, specifically. So that way, with these prospective students that are adding school codes to the FAFSA, they're able to reach out to the student, use this report to reach out to the student and potentially schedule a meeting with them. Okay, and I'm going to jump back over to the report center, and I'm going to talk about the student related report here. So the document analysis report. So once I click on this report's criteria is driven by start dates only. So essentially, any start date of your current enrollments, things of that nature, that's the dates that you would enter here. If you wanted to gain a scope of start dates, then you go ahead and go back a couple dates or a couple months or years, what have you, and then you would select execute criteria. Now, what this report will provide to you, it will identify the documents needed for a student, the documents rejected for a student, and the documents that have been received and, of course, also waived. Now, if you remember from phase 1 training, the document tracking module essentially will not highlight this for you, and it also will not highlight the documents that are needed for the students. So again, you could run this report, and again, if you click the 3 dotted lines, you can actually drop in those 6 needed documents. So you can actually identify what documents are missing for the student. And that goes the same for rejected documents. As you can see here, this one is rejected, and then this is the document that's rejected as the actual name of the document. Also, what you'll notice is that it will show you how many days that document has been in a needed status or in a rejected status. 20 days for the funding estimate. And the same thing will apply to the received documents. And again, you have the options up here to save any type of configuration and then load it every time. That essentially would just save you time in manipulating the report the next time you run it. You also, again, have the option to export this into an Excel format. And by exporting into an Excel format, it will keep those filters and sorting. You have that option. And again, the list of documents will be shown here based on the sorting and the dropping of columns that I added to the report. So if you like working with Excel, you have this option as well. Okay. So that concludes the report center. I'm going to go ahead and jump back over to the dashboard. And now we're going to talk about funding estimates. Funding estimates essentially can be created a couple of different ways. The funding estimate module is found down here below on your dashboard. So I'm just going to quickly explain to you what these different colors mean. So the first one is the red, so that means that it's unsigned. So this is representing 224 students that have unsigned funding estimates out there by both parties, both student and campus representative. And then the yellow is going to represent 16 students that have a funding estimate that they have signed, but it is pending a staff signature. And then lastly is, of course, green, which will represent all signed funding estimates. So our system does not remove any signed estimates or even remove any pending signature estimates. The only estimates that will be removed from the system, and that's by default after 7 calendar days, are unsigned funding estimates. You do have the option to increase that 7-day window to 14 days if you like, 30 days, 45 days, whatever you choose. Okay, so the first way I'm going to show you how to create a funding estimate is actually by going through the module itself. So you can click on any one of these buckets here, the red, yellow, or green. And then over to the right, you're going to see it says Create Funding Estimate. So once you select Create Funding Estimate, it's going to bring you to two different options. The first option is to look up a student record. So this is a student that's already existing within the system. So if I type in the name and I click on the student, it's going to immediately bring me to creating a new funding estimate screen. The second option is to continue without a student record. So essentially, these will be students that are possibly prospective students. They're shopping around. You want to be able to show them what your tuition is versus what potentially they can receive from financial aid. This would be the option you would use. So it is a more of a manual process. So as you see here, I would have to type in the student's name, their social, date of birth, and then the first two letters of their last name. Now, as far as the program info goes, you would be able to choose your program from the drop-down, the start date for that particular program, the location where that program is being offered, the units in that particular academic year, and then again their start date. So one key thing to note here is that this is the start date of the student's enrollment, and this is the start date of that student's academic year. This particular program that I chose, it is a term-based program, so that's why these options are available. So again, this is essentially for your repack students. So whenever you're creating your funding estimates for students that are within the system, you're going to want to ensure that which academic year that you're packaging for. Okay, so if you're a traditional institution where you have a fall and spring semester, then this date may fall again into a fall, but it might be in 2020, for example. Okay. Now for your clock hour or non-term institutions, the layout is going to be a little bit different. Okay, so with the non-term world, it is only going to ask you for a start date. Okay, and then you would essentially be able to choose the location and then also a unit reduction. So any transfer units that the student may have. And that does go the same for the in the term world, it wouldn't require that because you'll be entering the credits based on the academic year. And then the next thing you would do is select the academic level. So whether the student has attended college before, are they in their second year based on a transfer units, or is this a repack student? You have the options here to choose their grade level. Now your tuition scenario will always be in-state tuition rate unless your configuration may be a little bit different where out-of-state tuition, military tuition, and veteran tuition, or even disability tuition applies to your institution. But generally speaking, it's always going to be your in-state tuition rate. And then moving on to the ICER info, again, this is a prospective student. We may or may not have the ICER. Maybe when you ran your ICER daily report, you didn't find the student in there. So here you have the option to kind of manually enter in these items if you did have an ICER available. Now, you don't need an ICER available. The only two options you would need to select is the dependency status and whether the student has a bachelor's degree or not. And this will allow you to create a funding estimate. Now, once you've entered in all your information here, you simply hit save. And again, it will populate a funding estimate for you. Okay. Now, there's no e-signature availability with these funding estimates that are completed manually because the student is not in the system. So the system doesn't find an email address, it doesn't find a phone number in order to send this out to the student electronically. You do have the option to right click and print on the funding estimate if you wanted to and have the student sign. Again, the formatting does translate into a clean version for you. And then the print PDF option essentially is geared towards e-signature process, which we could talk about, which we will talk about a little bit later. Just going to show you what it looks like quickly. Okay, so it's more of in a letter format, greeting the student, stating where this funding estimate is from, highlights the program information for the student, their tuition, and the academic year breakdown. Okay, so that is one way on creating funding estimates for your students. And I'm going to go back to the dashboard here. Another way to create a funding estimate is by using the student lookup feature. So the student lookup feature, again, I'm just going to search for my student, and I want to go directly to the student's profile page. Okay, so now that I'm here on the student's profile page, under the disbursement information section, you're going to see funding estimates. And the color coding does apply the same, so anything in red is unsigned, green means that it is signed, and then yellow, which none of here are represented, but that would essentially mean that that's pending a staff signature. Now this, and then over here to the right, you will see create funding estimate. Now this funding estimate that I am going to create is for a student in a non-term program. Now and I'll go ahead and move into a term program as well, just after this one. But the steps will still be the same essentially. So now from here on the left, you remember this looks familiar. This is where you can manually enter in program information and ICER information. But since I have this student in the system and I have an ICER, I'm able to use the automation. So over here to the right where it says select existing package, I'm going to choose the program that I am packaging for. And you'll see on the left, it will pre-fill everything for me. And then in the ICER section, I'm going to choose the ICER. Now, this can be a little bit of a lengthy list. Eventually, you'll have multiple ICERs out there. Always keep in mind to choose the ICER in which that start date falls within that award year, of course, and then make sure that it's current, that you are using the current ICER. So once I choose this ICER over to the left, you'll see that it pre-populates everything for me. You still have the option to make updates to these items. Same thing with the program information as well. Now, the only reason why you would make any updates here in the ICER section, maybe this student added their school code 3 months ago, or added your institution school code 3 months ago, and now they attended a different school, and now they're trying to attend your institution, and this information may not be up to date. So you can make your adjustments here directly on the screen and make those updates in order to populate a more accurate funding estimate for the student. Now, once I've chosen my program and my ICER, I just simply hit save. And again, for those term-based institutions, it is going to be, the layout is going to be the same. So at the very top, you always have your program information shown, the tuition rate being used, the student start date. It lets you know when the funding estimate was created. Over to the right, you'll have your tuition and fees. Now, typically, the only thing that's going to be shown on the funding estimates for your students once you go live within your environment is going to be your direct cost and total program cost. And of course, the academic year COA will be present. What will not be present is the indirect costs. So these are going to be essentially your cost of attendance components. So this is removed from the funding estimate. Now, just below the program overview and then to the left of the tuition rate, you'll see the for administrative use only section. So this is essentially is the ICER info that we saw on the previous screen. But this also serves as the funding estimate engine. And the engine's on and off button is the auto recalc. So by unchecking the box, the engine is off. By checking the box, the engine is on. Okay? And I'll jump into a little bit more about that here in a second. But just below the ICER info section is your estimated method of payment. So essentially, your breakdown of academic years. Okay, again, this is a non-term world, so this is a 1,200-hour clock hour program. So the first year is 900 hours, and the second year is 300. Here are the dates and your disbursement dates. And then below that is the max eligibility column. So this is always going to let you know, or let the student know what they're fully eligible for. And then over to the right is the gross amount. So if you need to make any changes, you can here. Same thing with the year 2. And our award letters will prorate automatically for an academic year that's less than 900. It would also factor in the crossover period. So if this second disbursement date fell into the new award year after July 1st of any year, it will go to that particular award year's Pell chart, and it will add both the current award year and that future award year's Pell together. So in this case, this is a 1920, so this is very clean. But if it was 1920 going into 2021, this Pell amount will introduce both of those EFC's Pell amount together, and it will add them together and represent them here. The other funding section essentially is a drop down where you can add any outside non-Title IV funding sources for the student. So you have that ability here, and then you would add in those amounts here, and you would add them in both the gross and net amounts. But before I jump into that, let's talk about, again, this engine here. So again, this is the engine. It's turned on currently. So when we created this funding estimate, the student is independent. Let's just say for whatever reason, we made some corrections to the ICER and we determined that the student is now dependent. So I changed that to dependent, and I'm going to hit save and refresh. And save and refresh, you'll now see that the unsubsidized loan was reduced to $2,000, and then the proration applied in year 2. That goes the same if you make ICER corrections and now you have a new EFC. You can update that EFC. I'm going to change this back to independent and hit save and refresh. And you see that the Pell will change. And again, it will, if it's a crossover situation, it will apply for that crossover. I'll change that back. And let's talk about Pell LEU. So if this student is at 590% in Pell LEU, and I hit save and refresh, the funding estimate will calculate the remaining percentage for me, and then you'll see that it removed the Pell in year 2. Sub usage, so if the student has used sub in the past, let's just say 4 years of sub, and I hit save and refresh, you'll see that it moved all the subsidized loan into the unsub, and it did it in both years for you. If I do it where it's a little bit closer, where they may have some eligibility left, in the term world, it will account for whatever is remaining. So this is my mistake. This is a non-term world. So we'll put that back to 0. But you can see that once a student has reached that sub eligibility, it will account for that and move everything to the unsub. And that goes the same here with the aggregate sub and unsub totals. So if I was to enter 22,100 here in the sub. And we can leave that one the way it is. I check my box and hit save. The funding estimate will account for what's remaining in the sub, move that to the unsub, and then you'll see that it'll account for any sub used in the first year. If there's none available, it will move it to the unsub. Okay, I'll just change this back. So essentially that's how the engine works. If you create the funding estimate, again, you have the option in the beginning when you create it to make these adjustments. But if you get to it and it just doesn't seem right, you're able to, again, change it here on this screen. Now, let's just say this funding estimate is clean and ready to go. What I'm going to do is uncheck the box. And now that gives me free will to make any adjustments to tuition and to any funding dates on the funding estimate itself. Okay. Now this does, again, it does apply to a term world as well. The difference in a term world is that you will not be able to change your tuition costs over here on the right, and I'll show you that here in a second. But in a non-term world, you are able to make adjustments to the tuition. So let's just make this an even 16,000. Let's just say the student received a books and supplies waiver. Let's remove that. As far as the loans, let's just say the student only needs or only requesting $2,000 in the first year and no unsub in the second year. Okay, so here, as I'm changing, it is updating the amount owed by the student. So as you're changing funding for the student and what have you, you're always able to keep an eye here on the bottom to see what is owed by the student. So let's say you have some FSCOG for the student. You would, again, with the other funding section, you would need to put it in both the gross and net amounts column. And the student is receiving an institutional loan for $610. So that's going to put me at a zero balance for the student. But let's just say the student is receiving VA benefits as well. Okay, so you'll see now the student has a credit of $5,000. Now, once this funding estimate is good to go, essentially what you would just need to do is save it, right? So you would just select save, and now that funding estimate is saved for you. So now you can send this off to the student. Now this demo site, we don't have the options shown here, but again, you have the option to right click and print. Again, you can print out a funding estimate. But also what you would see here are three buttons. PDF is going to be one of them, and I'll explain to you what this e-sign passive acceptance. But typically speaking, you would see general notification, which would mean an email to the student. Now that particular feature will only work if the student portal is turned on. If the student portal is not turned on, sending an email to the student will not allow them to e-sign a funding estimate. The second option that you would see is text notification. So this is going to use that mobile number that was entered in when you imported your student into this system, and is going to send the student a text message with a link to the funding estimate, and also requesting for them to sign the fund if they are accepting the funding estimate, to text back a code to the text message that they received. So this happens all in real time. And I want to go ahead and show you here. So again, on your student profile page, you will have access to all the students' notifications. So in this one right here on 220, there was a text sent to the student. So I'm going to take a look at that. So here's essentially what the text message will say to the student. It does greet the student by their name, their award letter code to e-sign that funding estimate. So this is the code that they would text back, and they do need to reply within 72 hours. And then here is the link. So very quickly, I'm going to copy this link and drop it in a browser for you so you guys can see how that essentially would look. Let's see if I find a different one. Oop, clicking buttons here, sorry. Okay, seems that feature is not working on the demo site, but essentially it will be a snapshot of that funding estimate that they can view on their mobile device. Now the ePassive signature option essentially allows the staff member to electronically sign for the student. So this is only available when there is already an approved funding estimate within the student's document tracking section. So here we're on the student's profile page, and again, this is our demo site. So you'll see here that there's some funding estimates that were approved. So essentially, that ePassive signature option is available for the student or for the staff member to use. Now, once they select ePassive signature option, you'll see that it will apply the signature to that funding estimate. And then using that feature, you do need to select one more time, send for processing. And once you do that and you go back to your student's profile page, you see that today we submitted a funding estimate through the ePassive signature option. And then, of course, you can view it here. And this is essentially how the student would see it on their mobile device as well before they sign. Now, in situations where you have a student that signs a funding estimate and then maybe 2 or 3 months down the road, they say, I want to increase my unsubsidized loan, or maybe they've received some additional funding that you want to add to their funding estimate, you have the option here to clone a funding estimate. And cloning it essentially will just create a duplicate of what we just created. So here's us reducing our unsubsidized loan, removing the unsub here, adjusting tuition cost, and then you simply make your adjustments. So the student wanted to increase. Okay, so we did the increase, and now the student's getting a credit of $8,000 back. And then once this is all said and done and it's good to go, again, you hit save. And then you have the ePassive signature option available to you here at the bottom. Now, with the ePassive acceptance, it does notify the student. So, compliantly, we are having the student sign the very first one, and then any subsequent award letters or funding estimates thereafter, we are applying an ePassive signature and sending the student a notification. So once the ePassive signature acceptance is applied to a funding estimate, the system will send the student a notification stating that a new funding estimate was created, and it would advise them to log into their portal to be able to view that funding estimate. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to jump over into a term world. Okay, and I'm just going to use an existing funding estimate that was created already. Again, the steps are the same. Just the layout may just be a little bit different. Okay, let me just create a new one here. So again, you have for the term world, you do have to enter in the academic year units and the academic year start date. And this one, we don't have an ICER for this one, so we're just going to go ahead and choose the two options here. And then hit save. So again, the top section is the same. Over to the right is even the same. But again, remember, in a term world, you can't change your tuition costs here directly. I'll show you where you can do that. The funding estimate engine is the same. Here's your on and off. Now the layout here is just a little bit different. So this is a two-term institution. So as you see, it does break out it'll only show the academic year for the student, and it'll show term 1 and term 2, and these are the dates and credits. Now the difference with this funding estimate is that if you change the credits here, it's going to automatically reduce everything for you. And then same thing here in the next term. So even if you go over the 12 credit threshold, it is always going to put the student at that 12 credit. Now, as far as the tuition costs, you would essentially be changing your tuition costs down here below. So here where it says tuition and fees per term. So let's say this was 5,000 and this was 5,000. You'll see up here at the right, it's going to increase it for you. And the same thing applies. It will represent the remaining balance here for the student. You have the option to add in any type of additional funding source. And then here is your option to whether send that as a text or a general notification that I was trying to explain earlier. Okay. And actually here with this student, I can show you essentially the notifications. So here is one that was sent. So if I click view, again, asking the student if they accept the funding estimate to type in that code. But I'm going to take this link here and drop it in the browser. And here you'll see that it downloaded a view version of that funding estimate. So here you can see how the funding estimate will look. This is how it will look from the student's perspective on their mobile device. And again, everything happens in real time. As you know, it takes a couple of clicks to create a funding estimate. Once you are ready to send it, you'll send it. The student will receive that text message right away. They're able to view it, reply to it, and then submit it as a signature. Once they submit it as a signature, at this time is when the staff member you can go to the student's profile page here. And like this one right here, this funding estimate is in yellow, so this is pending a staff member signature. So you would just simply click view here, and then at the bottom, it's going to ask you to sign. Now, if I sign this, it applies my name to this. And then the other option is going back to your dashboard. So in that funding estimate yellow bucket where it says pending signature, you click on the yellow bucket, and then essentially you're just searching for your student here. And then you simply click view on that funding estimate, and then at the bottom you would sign. Now, once a funding estimate is signed electronically, that's where that print PDF version will come into play. If the print PDF version is not signed, essentially it will show that the student did not accept the funding on that particular funding estimate. But if it is signed, I'm just going to view this one here. I'm going to click print PDF. So the difference is if it was unsigned electronically, the accepted column would say ends. In this case, this one is signed, so you'll have Ys, meaning the student accepted the funding. In addition to that, you'll see that the electronic signatures were applied to the actual funding estimate. In a situation where this was not electronically signed, this section would be blank. So this is just a formal way to either mail out a award letter or funding estimate to a student or present it to them in a more formal format. So you have that option available to you. Okay. So essentially that is your funding estimates in a non-term world and as well in a term world. And what we're going to move into next is the actual student portal layout. So I'm going to change the look and feel here to represent more of a mobile display. And I'm going to log in as a student. So once a student logs in, they're greeted with their name, their student ID, of course your school's information and phone number. They'll have access to it here as well. And then your logo will be present over here to the right. Now the student is going to be greeted with notifications. Any unread notifications, they're automatically going to be displayed as soon as they log in. So it gives that student easy access to go in and view those notifications. So here's a required documents notification. And I know it'll be a little bit small, but essentially it's saying that they have some needed documents out there that need to be submitted. In this case, a funding estimate and an enrollment agreement. They also are going to be greeted with any required documents that they need to complete. Now they can click on the three lines here over on the top right, and this will give them more of a full format or menu of the student portal. So again, their account information is here if they need to change their password. All their unread notifications are here, and then of course all their read notifications are also here. So as you can see, the system does not remove anything. They'll always have access to all this information, as well as you all. It's just the layout may be a little bit different. Then they have their document tracking section, so they'll be able to see any required documents, any documents that they've submitted, and any approved documents as well. And they can always click on them if they needed to go back and view them directly from their mobile device. Also, they'll have here miscellaneous. This miscellaneous is going to cover references. So this is important for your dependent students. So if your student is dependent, they wanted to add a parent or guardian as somebody that has access to the portal, where they can, a parent will be able to complete forms, sign forms electronically, view the student's financial aid and things of that nature. Here's where the student will go to add that reference. So if you click on add on the reference link, at the very top it says add new reference. And then again, you would choose add new reference here. And as you can see, now you're going to choose the relationship, their name of that parent, phone number, email. And once all of that is completed, you have to check this box. Checking this box is a lot, telling the system that you want to create an account for this particular user. Now, of course, we have to meet all FERPA compliance regulations. So the student does choose the level of access the parent or guardian would have for the document section, funding info section, notifications, and the question queue. So, and then from the drop down, they can choose for documents, for example, all access, meaning they can actually edit the document, or just parent signature access, where all they could do is sign the document. The funding info is more of a view format, so all access would be able just stating that they can view all the funding for the student. Same thing with the notifications and with the question queue. With the question queue, parents can actually submit questions as well. And I'll go into the question queue here in a second. Now, once you've completed all this information, or the student has, they would just simply hit save. So what will occur is kind of the same thing that would occur when a new student is added to the system. This parent is actually going to receive a registration email for the portal, and within that registration email is going to be their username. The system will automatically assign a username to the parent and the student, and then it will provide to them a link, and that link will be immediately ask them to set their password. Once they set their password, essentially they log in and they're good to go. They can go ahead and access the documents or whatever level of access the student provided for them. So this is very neat tool used for document collecting and things of that nature where parents are unavailable. It makes it a lot easier for both the school and the parent at this point. Now, jumping back to the menu, under the references, you have important links, so students can click in here and basically they're able to go to create their FSA ID, they complete their FAFSA, their MPN, their entrance, any type of exit counseling, or even view their student loan history as well. Now, the Q&A section, it's a tool, and it can be turned on and off essentially for any institution. It's a tool that a student can actually post a question and ask their financial aid representative at the school directly. So this is handled and managed by the institution. So the student will be able to go in here, select post a question. They could choose a topic. If it has to do with documents, their awards, anything like that, they choose the topic and then their question. Right? The most common question of all. So where's my refund? And then they hit submit. And then here you see under financial awards is the question they submitted. They click on answered, it will show them any answered questions. So here was an answered question that I did back on the 21st. Where's my money? It's coming. Okay. So that is a useful tool as well to kind of alleviate any email and back and forth communication. And again, everything is stored. None of this information will be removed from the system, and it happens all in real time as well. Now, if we jump into the required documents, I'm going to choose enrollment agreement. So here this is a required document the student needs to submit. Not necessarily this is something that they would upload, but let's just state that it is something that they would upload. So if it was something that they can upload, essentially right from their mobile device, they could take a picture of the enrollment agreement, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 pages, and essentially once they've taken a picture of the document, they select choose file. This is going to open up their PC's directory, or if they're working from a desktop, but essentially their mobile device's photo section. And I'm just going to look for a quick document that I could use here. Okay, and then it would just add, continue. So that would be the first photo. Here's the second photo, and let's just say there's a third photo. Okay, so I have all 3 of my photos attached, and then I would simply select upload. Okay, so now you'll see that required document was removed. So all we see is the funding estimate. And if we go into the menu, you'll see here submitted documents is received. So again, just showing you how real time the system is. So if I click on that and now I click on the document that I just submitted, what I really want to show you here is how the funding estimate or the documents that are being submitted through the portal side by taking photos, it will condense everything into one file for the student. So it will condense all those 3 photos and make it one upload for the student. Okay, and then I'll jump back over to required documents. So a funding estimate. So a funding estimate that's sent via email to a student. So if you recall early on in the training, I mentioned that there's essentially two ways a funding estimate can be sent, either by email or by text message. So again, the email will only work if the student portal is turned on. Once the student portal is turned on, you'll have the option to send it through text or through email. If it's through email, it's going to go ahead and populate here for the student in the student portal. And they can click on the funding estimate from here. And then you'll notice down here below, a little bit different from the enrollment agreement, is that it does state that this funding estimate is in e-form. So same thing with our verification documents or any other documents that we have in e-form. The student, once they click on that document, if it's available in e-form, they will have the option to upload the actual photos of the document or complete it in an e-form. So with the funding estimate in e-form, here's that funding estimate that was created. They simply click on it. Okay, so they would normally be able to click on it. Again, sorry, I apologize, it's our demo site. So essentially what they'll be able to view is the academic year, start and end date, and then they'll be able to click on the plus signs there that are available, and it will actually break out to them the awards that they will be receiving for that particular academic year. And then they will have the option to sign it directly from the screen itself. Okay, and now I'm going to jump out of here. Just going to log out, and I'm going to quickly show you the Q&A section. Sorry. So in that Q&A section where I submitted my question is down here below, question Q. So here is that question that I submitted. So here's where's my refund. I can view that question. And here is where I can answer that student's particular question. And then check the box is answered. So, and I hit save. So here's the response history here. But if I jump back into the question queue, or even the dashboard, just to show you, it moves from here all the way to answered. And then click on answered, and then you'll be able to see the answered questions and then view it. And here's your history again. Okay, so that essentially concludes phase 2 training. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to Ravi or myself, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions for you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.